Nintendo Switch!
How's it going, everybody? It's Yong here with a Nintendo Switch discussion video. Oh boy, it's been an interesting couple of hours watching Nintendo fans melt down after Eurogamer released what they believe to be the final specs of the Nintendo Switch. Here's a basic rundown for those who have not been keeping up with this story. So according to Eurogamer and Digital Foundry, the Nintendo Switch is powered by a modified version of the NVIDIA Tegra X1 that seemingly runs on an older Maxwell architecture rather than the newer Pascal architecture. Now, as many of you may know, the Switch will run on two different power configurations: portable mode when undocked and console mode when docked. According to Eurogamer's report, in console mode, when the console is docked and at its most powerful, the CPU runs at a clock speed of 1020 MHz. The GPU clock speeds have a floor of 307.2 MHz and a ceiling of 768 MHz, and memory clock speeds range from 1331 MHz to 1600 MHz. In portable mode, the CPU and memory clock speeds remain the same as in console mode, but the GPU is locked at the floor clock speed of 307.2 MHz, which is exactly 40% of the Switch's maximum 768 MHz GPU clock speed from when it's docked. Now, for those who aren't tech savvy, the bottom line is that based on these numbers alone, it's looking like the Switch will be powerful enough to run Wii U level games with slightly better graphics performance at 720p in portable mode and 1080p in console mode. So at its worst, the Switch is basically a slightly better Wii U, and at its best, it's a Wii U that can run all its games at 1080p resolution. Interesting to note is that 720p drives 44.4% of the pixels that a 1080p screen does, which matches up pretty well with how Switch runs at 40% of its full power in portable mode. Essentially, this puts the Switch somewhere around less than halfway between Wii U and Xbox One in terms of pure computing power. So yeah, after Eurogamer broke this story, a lot of people took to public forums to express their disdain, with many stating that these hardware specs fall short of even the lowest expectations. People were particularly awestruck by how these numbers fall short of even the baseline Tegra X1 chip used in devices like the NVIDIA Shield Android TV and the Google Pixel C tablet, both of which are over a year old now. In terms of Switch's 1020 MHz CPU clock speed, that's half of what you'd get on a standard Tegra X1. In terms of GPU, the maximum clock speed of 768 MHz in console mode is a little over 3/4 of the standard Tegra X1's GPU clock speed. So yeah, some pretty significant reductions there. Some of you may be wondering, why would Nintendo nerf the Switch's Tegra X1 chip to such an extent? Well, there are two reasons. One, Nintendo wants Switch to have decent battery life when in portable mode, and two, Nintendo doesn't want their console to run hot and throttle. Throttling is what happens when the CPU or GPU automatically lowers its clock speeds when temperatures become too high in order to prevent hardware damage, causing frame rates and overall performance to lower over time. That's the last thing that you want on a device that is meant for long hours of gameplay, so Nintendo's solution was lowering baseline clock speeds on the Switch's Tegra chips. Do keep in mind that the Switch is smaller and more compact than devices like the NVIDIA Shield Android TV and the Google Pixel C tablet, which is why more drastic measures need to be taken to maintain decent battery life and temperatures. This brings me to another major source of disappointment for hardware enthusiasts. Many argue that Nintendo could have alleviated the necessity to nerf the Switch's hardware to that extent by going with a Pascal Tegra chip instead of Maxwell. For those who don't know what those are, the short version is that the new Pascal architecture of chips offer more power for significantly less battery consumption compared to Maxwell. In simple terms, Pascal chips are significantly more power efficient, offering the best graphics bang for your battery life buck. The problem is that Pascal is newer tech, so maybe they didn't have enough ready for the Switch, or the cost of each Pascal chip's unit was significantly more than Maxwell, and with Nintendo wanting to sell the Switch at an affordable price point, maybe Pascal wasn't an option. But the argument is that by going with Pascal, Nintendo could have made the Switch significantly more powerful while adhering to their battery life goal. News that Nintendo will be using Maxwell is particularly disappointing because Nvidia's press release regarding the Switch's Tegra chip states that the console will be using the same architecture as the world's top-performing GeForce gaming graphics cards, which most assumed was referencing the GTX 1060, 1070, and 1080, all of which use Pascal. So all in all, lots of disappointments and what-ifs, but also a lot of conjecture. I think it's important to keep in mind that all we have right now are rumored clock speed numbers, which by themselves don't paint the full picture of a hardware's capabilities. While they do give you a rough idea of the Switch's computational capabilities, without all the details, it's impossible to discern the full potential of the Switch at this point. The best look we have gotten of the console in action was off-screen gameplay footage of Zelda Breath of the Wild from The Tonight Show with Jimmy Fallon, and I remember how it took one look for people to notice significant frame rate improvements over the Wii U version, both in console and portable mode. The fact of the matter is that, at the moment, there is simply no way of knowing the kinds of hardware modifications and software optimizations that have been made to the Switch, so before declaring that the console will be dead on arrival, I would hold off until Nintendo shows more during their upcoming January 12th event. Now, it's also important to set realistic expectations. I mean no offense when I say this, but anyone expecting Xbox One level of performance with decent battery life and thermals on a small tablet-sized device at a sub-$300 price point is delusional. Creating such a device is not an impossible feat, but the kind of engineering that such a device would require would not come cheap. Nintendo's goal with the Switch is to sell a mainstream, affordable gaming device that can be played at home and on the go. To achieve this, you have to understand that sacrifices will be made, especially where computational power is concerned. It's also important to look at the Switch from a different perspective. While the Switch will certainly trail behind in terms of raw power from a home console perspective, from a portable perspective, it is by far the most powerful dedicated handheld console Nintendo has ever made. I don't know about you, but seeing a game like Zelda Breath of the Wild run so smoothly and beautifully on such a small device still blows my mind. Not to mention that the more portable-oriented games like Pokémon will not only look gorgeous, but will also seamlessly hook up to the TV. I do understand that some people might not be as interested in the portable aspect of the Switch and would have just preferred a dedicated home console with high-fidelity graphics, but for better or for worse, that's simply not the kind of arms race that Nintendo's going for. Their goal with the Switch is to make a console that can be whatever the user needs it to be, a portable console, a home console, or a combination of both, and such a feat does require a fine balance between portability and raw power. So no, the Switch is by no means the smallest or most powerful device, but it's definitely quite capable for its size. Now, there are among those whose disappointment doesn't necessarily stem from the lower potential graphical fidelity. For many, it's the fear that the Switch will not be powerful enough to receive adequate third-party support. They fear that it'll be the Wii and Wii U all over again, both of which did not get many of the high-profile, high-budget AAA titles due to hardware constraints. That is definitely a valid concern, and it's one that I have myself. However, I will say that so far, it's incredibly optimistic. Just seeing Todd Howard praise the Switch like the next coming of Jesus, and just the fact that Bethesda supporting a Nintendo console at all is giving me quite a bit of hope. Keep in mind that Bethesda has never supported Nintendo before because the hardware wasn't up to par. But with the Switch, Bethesda jumped on board pretty quickly, and that has to count for something. It could very well be indication that we haven't gotten the full picture as far as the Switch's hardware goes. I know some of you will argue that Skyrim is technically a 6 years old game, but from the footage I saw, it looks like Bethesda's porting over Skyrim Special Edition, which only runs on current generation consoles like Xbox One and PS4. Do I expect the game to look as good on the Switch as it does on Xbox One or PS4? No, but if it looks good enough, then perhaps the ability to play the game in portable mode while lying on the bed or while traveling somewhere will outweigh some of the sacrifices in graphics. Let's also not forget that according to Laura Kate Dale from website letsplayvideogames.com, who has been a reliable source of Switch news, her sources told her that From Software has been testing out the Switch and managed to get Dark Souls 3 running on the console with a level of performance that they're happy with internal discussions happening of possibly releasing all 3 Dark Souls games on the Switch with all DLC bundled in if the Switch sells well. So if the Switch is capable of running Dark Souls 3 at an adequate level, I once again say we don't have the full picture of what the Switch is capable of from both a hardware and software standpoint. So what I'm trying to say in this video is that it's important to maintain realistic expectations and acknowledge that with its compact form factor and affordable price point, the Switch will not be as powerful as Xbox One. But it's also important to reserve judgment on the Switch's full potential until we have more details beyond just some rumored raw numbers that don't really paint a full picture, especially when we're starting to see third-party support from companies like Bethesda and From Software, who I never thought would jump on the Nintendo bandwagon so quickly. Not to mention that if Switch sells well and harnesses a good audience base, third-party support will come, and based on the positivity and excitement surrounding the Switch, its potential to see a wider audience base with its hybrid nature, and most importantly, the strong lineup of games that the console will seemingly launch with, Splatoon, new Mario game, new Zelda game, and more. If Nintendo continues hitting all the right notes in advertising their new console like they've been doing, I see great potential for big sales, certainly way more than Wii U. So yeah, that's my 2 cents. What are your thoughts on the matter? Are you disappointed in the rumored Switch specs, or do you think there's more to the hardware than meets the eye? How do you think specs will affect third-party support? Are you excited for the console's hybrid nature, or do you think Nintendo should have just gone with something more traditional? Respectfully share your opinions and theories in the comments below, and to be further updated on all things Nintendo Switch, stay tuned right here on Yong Yeah. I'll see you guys next time. Yong out!